We had a that baseball brand that's taking over. So
We'll get those doors shut.
Is there a community meeting tonight?
I think they were one of the first people to start really.
You guys all good?
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and call to order the City of Lake Elmo Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. First item is to please rise as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And as a reminder for anybody that does wish to speak tonight at the public hearing, there's sheets there in the back corner. You'll need to fill out one of those before we get to that item. But for now, the second is to approve this evening's agenda, which includes approval of our minutes, the public hearing, as well as some communication updates.
Motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Breeze, second by Commissioner Bullock to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Third item is to approve the meeting minutes from the previous meeting of September 9th, 2024. Were there any edits, comments? We'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda, the meeting minutes from September 9th.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Stiles, seconded by Commissioner Rakeham to approve the meeting minutes of September 9th, 2024. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We're now moving on to item 4, which is our public hearing this evening for the Lake Elmo Elementary. We'll hear from city staff first. Do we have applicant as well? Followed by the applicant, and then we'll move to the actual public hearing.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members of the Planning Commission. So I have a presentation that will be up on the screen here shortly. As mentioned, we're talking about several requests from Stillwater Area Public School District for this is not the Oakland Middle School, this is the Lake Elmo Elementary, so this title slide is incorrect. So we are looking at the site here on the screen. I think everyone is familiar with this location because the city approved last spring a comp plan amendment and rezone at this location. So the school district has applied for a major subdivision, a preliminary plat, and then 2 variances and a conditional use permit for the establishment of a public school. So the site plan that was submitted by the school district is up on the screen now. In total, this area, this site is about 47.6 acres. That's before any right-of-way dedication, which is required. The building that is being proposed, you can see the building footprint on the screen here. It's just under 150,000 square feet. This site is planned to have 1,100 students for its enrollment and 130 staff to support those students. We have 2 different access points that we'll discuss on a later slide on access. We have stormwater ponding provided on site for this project, connection to the city's sewer and water system, and then lastly, we needed 2 access points for emergency services. So that's just a high-level overview of what you're seeing on the site. Of course, there's other amenities that come with an elementary school, ball fields, play facilities, and stuff like that. So as mentioned, for the land use, the future land use was re-guided as institutional last spring with the Associated Public Facilities Zoning District, where this use has a requirement for a CUP, so that's why that's been requested. I'll jump right into the preliminary plat or the major subdivision. So you can see the proposed plat on the screen. A subdivision was required to have this project be consistent with the city's development requirements. We're developing a site from what was previously unplatted. We have a need for a right-of-way dedication along 2 county road corridors and at that corner where they intersect. And then we also have the ability to get those drainage and utility easements that are required by the city for this site. So those are all the things that you're seeing on the plat. In terms of the variances, I'll walk you through them in, briefly here. We'll talk about some of the site improvements, and then we'll go back to the findings to support the variances. So the first variance is to the city's maximum acreage for a public facilities use, which is 20 acres. This use is noted at 47.6 acres, so obviously it's over the city's 20-acre maximum, which is why the variance is requested. There are a few things that drive the need for this site to be the size that it is. It's at the intersection of two county roads. There's access spacing concerns. Of course, we have the buffer to the Oakdale Gun Club. That's shown on the concept in that red boundary or that red line. So there's a number of reasons why, and we can talk about those as if the planning commission likes. In terms of the other variance, it's to the buffer, which is required for uses in the public facilities district. And the area circled on the screen is the reason the variance is needed. It's for that access, for the bus access to be located near a property zoned residential. Again, there are access spacing concerns along these county road corridors that we've worked very closely with the county to understand. All right, getting into the conditional use permit, this is where we're gonna talk a lot about the different elements of the site. Apologies in advance, this is kind of a long presentation from me, so there's a lot going on this site, so I'll try and provide you information, hopefully efficiently, but if you have questions, you can let me know. We looked at a number of things on the site, including whether, obviously the land use and the bulk standards. This is a unique proposal because of the proximity of the Oakdale Gun Club, so we had to keep in mind state statute about shooting range law, and I'll talk about that. We've looked at the building design, the proposed landscaping and tree mitigation for this wooded parcel. We've also looked at grading, stormwater, and other impacts and needs for public infrastructure. So in terms of the bulk standards, as you might guess, with this relatively large parcel, there's not really a challenge to meet the actual city standards for setbacks, lot area, and width, and those things. So largely, all of those things are met, again, except for that maximum lot area to which the variance is requested. All right, so I'm gonna spend a couple slides here talking about the shooting range law. This is something you'll recall that we talked about at the last time the school district was in front of you for the comp plan amendment. Minnesota state statutes have what's called Chapter 87A, which was adopted in 2005. It's intended to protect shooting ranges from becoming non-compliant when uses are established around them, and then generate nuisance complaints and things like that. So it's really intended to allow those gun ranges in the state to continue operation, shooting ranges. So in the law, basically any use that's established within a buffer around a shooting range, that's always going to be 750 feet from the property boundary. No use can be established in that buffer that would cause the shooting range to become non-compliant with state performance standards. So we have explored that pretty thoroughly. We looked at the performance standards that were established by the state when it passed the law, and they kind of break down into two categories: performance standards for the actual gun club, things like shooting lane setbacks and various elements of the actual gun club property. Those were largely not a part of this review because it's Oakdale Gun Club's sort of property, and we're really looking at improvements on a property next to it where the other set of standards for noise was important to understand. So we have gotten a noise study from the school district to understand compliance on the site. So that's in a nutshell how we've had to look at this. The school did have a acoustic consultant do noise testing on the property and submit a report to the city. It was provided in the staff report. There were 4 locations that were measured on the site, at the property line, at the nearest location of school activities, which is ball fields, at approximately the edge of that 750-foot buffer, and then at the location of the school building, just so we can understand the impacts at all those locations. The state statute establishes a way to measure the noise impacts of gun ranges. As we know, it's not like white noise like by a freeway where it's constant, it's percussive events. And so There's basically an averaging that takes place, and so the acoustic consultant has basically provided the information that we needed to say, actually, it showed that at all the locations that they measured, and they measured in July when the gun club was having public events and things of that nature, all of those measurement locations were below the threshold that was the maximum in statute. So, long story short, this site does comply or does not cause the shooting range to become non-compliant. We also did ask the school district's acoustic consultant to provide information about the fall, because we know that things are a little different in the fall. We have different caliber rifles shot at the gun range. We have, that's still a public time where people can go to the gun club. And we also don't have leaves on the trees. And so they were able to provide some methodology that was appropriate and more conservative than not, that also did not show the increase to go above the 63 decibel standard in statute. So they have provided evidence to support that. And there are two conditions I will add that we're recommending to you to make sure that we keep the conformance on the noise issue in mind. All right, so I'll move us on briefly to the design of the building. The applicant and their architect are here, and they can probably more succinctly explain to you all of the different aspects of the design on the building. We did, of course, look at the design for conformance with the city's building standards. And you'll see several different elevations here on the slide. And on this slide, it's a close-up with some of those materials that are proposed on the building. You'll see things like mostly brick, which is what's desired by the city's ordinance, glass, and some accents such as pre-finished metal. So this building is conforming with the sort of overarching goals of the city's design standards. All right, so we have to talk about trees. It's, as you know, this is a pretty heavily wooded parcel. And so I do have that picture of the 2023 aerial on the slide here. You'll see that the trees on this site are really packed in together. There's a lot of factors that go into the reasons that trees had to be removed from this parcel. Many of them relate to just standard, things that you have to go with a school, access, drives, parking areas, queuing requirements on the site so that traffic stays on the property and not on the county road, trails, the need for stormwater ponds to manage the stormwater on site, not off of it, not push it off. Of course, the building, and then lastly, obviously having those improvements be located in a spot that's more outside of that buffer from the shooting range. So there's a lot of reasons that trees are removed, but you see there's a lot of trees on the site. And so on the screen, you'll see this is the tree mitigation plan that was submitted by the school district's team. They did their best to code the trees with two different colors. You'll see an orange color, and those are trees that were planted by the former property owner who acquired the property in the late 60s, early 70s, and owned it until they sold it to the school district. And then the blue trees, which were naturally occurring trees, according to the landscape architect. So the school district has coded these trees to make a case for an exception to pretty significant tree mitigation requirements. So I want to talk about that provision within the city's ordinance. There is the ability for applicants to request an exception from the tree mitigation requirements. You'll see the purpose of that sections on the screen here. Basically it says that the the city recognizes that there are instances where we have really heavily wooded properties. It may be infeasible for applicants to have to mitigate all of the trees that are moving. So it allows the city to, on a case-by-case basis, provide relief to the tree mitigation requirements that are in the city's ordinance. The last sentence, the city will only approve the use of a fee in lieu of tree replacement or other mitigation methods when all the required tree replacement cannot practically or reasonably occur on the site in the judgment of the city. There are also 3 criteria that projects will have to meet in order to qualify for an exception. This project doesn't appear to meet those criteria. So being not feasible to combine with other properties around it, we have a parcel that's kind of on its own here. Making it larger would be even more contrary to the city's ordinance. Strict adherence to the replacement standards would prevent reasonable development. Again, that does, kind of appear to be the case here. And we'll go through some of the proposals with, or some of the aerials over the history of this parcel. Lastly, the minimum, basically the exception that's requested is really the minimum needed to accomplish what this development consists of. So we dug into some old aerial imagery. This is an aerial image of this site from 1964, just before the property owner that formerly owned the property took ownership. You'll see that this property was largely without any trees. There is one area, that low kind of depression area, did have some trees in it, but other than that, it was largely free of any trees. Fast forward to 1991, you'll see that the site, again, largely remains without any trees. So there is a case to be made for what you see here in 2003, which is a bunch of pine trees, mostly evergreen trees, which were planted on the site. I don't know why the particular patterns were located, why they put the trees in these patterns, but it does appear that the property owner planted those trees. And again, here they are at more maturity today, 2023. So in the staff report, we've summarized some of the differences here with providing the exception and without, to help the Planning Commission and City Council understand what's being requested. In total, we look at caliper inches when we talk about trees, so that's basically the inches of the diameter of the trunk. There's 29,296 caliper inches currently on site. Of those, 21,000, just over that, are proposed to be removed. The school district's team identified about 27,000 of the caliper inches on site to have been planted by the former property owner. So when we look at the mitigation requirement without an exception, we effectively have a mitigation required of 12,000 caliper inches after we allow a certain number of the trees to be removed. Using the city's rate that it uses, it's in lieu fee that we have in our grading agreements, that's $325 per caliper inch. We're looking at over $4 million of a fee for mitigation. When we just look at the evergreen replacement rate, which is replacing one tree for every two that are removed, we're still looking at over $2 million of fee. So understanding that is a significant amount of money to charge a school district, staff have also just looked at what is the mitigation required with the exception that is being requested. There are many fewer trees that were naturally occurring on site. According to the mitigation plan, we end up with the requirement for 149 caliper inches of mitigation, and that using our in lieu fee is just under 50,000. So I will also share with you on the right of the screen, the city has other requirements for this property that have been included in the conditions of approval that are suggested. One of those things is that stormwater ponding be managed obviously on the property, not just for the school's improvement, but for intersection improvements that are going to be required down the road. That will reduce the city's obligation to pay for that in the future. So that's actually saving the city money down the road when those intersection improvements take place. That does cause more trees to get removed on the site to make room for the stormwater ponding that's required.
What are we looking at on that last slide?
So you'll see the gray hatched area. The easiest way to say this is that gray hatched area is the removals on each image. And so if we go from left to right, we're looking at, that's the difference between the mitigation after the conditions of approval that we've got in this CUP recommended for you. That's after those are accounted for. Again, we'll talk about the stormwater impacts on another slide here. So I just wanted to be clear about what the tree removals will look like moving forward as well. All right, so this is my last slide on tree mitigation, the staff recommendation. So we're looking at recommending to you no credit for any of the trees that are saved. And that's been incorporated into the staff report and the conditions. Normally when developers save trees, they're given a credit for that with the mitigation. In this case, because a lot of the school district is requesting an exception, we're not gonna count any of the previous owner planted trees for a credit. It just doesn't make sense, we're double counting. The next thing is that the fee in lieu for this project be at $325 per caliper inch up to a total of $50,000. That would be a fee that's received by the city and then held by the city in a tree fund and used in projects elsewhere in the community to plant new trees where there's a need. Lastly, there are some areas on the site where additional tree plantings could likely be located. I think the southern and the eastern boundary seem to be areas where more tree plantings might be appropriate. I'm going to move on to landscaping. So of course there are trees removed. There are requirements to plant trees. So we've gotten the city's landscape architect to do a review of the landscaping plan as well. The school district is proposing 253 trees on this plan. You'll see those located on the image here. The image also has if I can get the cursor to show up here on the screen, there we go. It's kind of hovering over this darker gray area. That's the area that's not being touched. In other words, the trees there are saved. So the new trees would be in addition to those that remain on site. Also part of this conversation is where is the school planning to irrigate, because that's where really it makes the most sense to plant more trees because they'll have a better success in the future. And you can see there's a hatched outline around the school building footprint, the drives, and the ball fields. That's kind of the irrigated area.
Is there any plan to reuse any of the stormwater for irrigation at all? I mean, maybe we haven't gotten that far yet. But.
At this time, no. That was a question that was asked of the other project at City Council. There is no requirement right now in the city's ordinance to do that. It always behooves the applicants to look at it, though.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so the last slide for me on landscaping. We do have a recommendation for greater screening from the city's landscape architect on the northern property line, and that's to add some more trees there. There is a minimum of 253 tree plantings, so anything would be in addition to that. And then there are other minor revisions in the landscape architect's memo. I'm going to jump to parking next. So this is pretty simple. There are 53 classrooms or equivalent spaces. We have 3 stalls required per classroom. So in total, 159 spaces are required for this use, and the school district is providing 224, so they're meeting the city's requirement. Another area that's been a big part of this review is traffic and access. These are 2 county roads, and so coordination with Washington County has been pretty critical, and we've been able to do that with bi-monthly meetings between the city, the school, and Washington County. So these comments, a lot of them are anticipated by the school district because of those meetings. The Washington County review memo provided a number of requirements, turn lanes for both access points to the site, which are shown on the plan. Washington County is required that no queuing take place on county roads, and the site plan has been revised to address that. There is a need for a traffic light or a roundabout at the entrance, the main entrance to the school, which is on 10th Street North. That will be required at the school district's cost, and they are planning to provide that improvement. With the bus entrance on Lake Elmo Avenue, that could be restricted to a 3/4 access. That detail may still be worked through, so it may be that left outs are prohibited. The county did mention that they prefer 1 versus 2 access points, but I think it's understood that some of these other requirements help to manage the 2 access points. And lastly, the school district was suggested to provide basically trails on the site to connect into future development. From the city engineer, of course, there were comments on this as well. So access management, the access points are, required to be approved by the county, and so that coordination has helped to get there. Turn lane improvements have to be, again, to the county standard. Intersection controls are required at that main entrance. And then in addition to that, the county will require intersection controls at 10th Street North and Lake Elmo Avenue. There will be temporary controls, and then in the future, the county will come in and add a new permanent intersection improvement. Emergency services have also been able to review and comment on this plan. And lastly, bituminous trails are required along those county road corridors. And there's also, on this current site plan, not great connectivity to the north. So any residents that would come from the village area by bike or walking, or perhaps any of the trails from Royal Golf Club. So one suggested condition that I've actually added to the end of this presentation is to consider those residents.
Are those intersection improvements, the temporary ones, on the schools paying for as well?
Yes, that's a good question. The school district will need to cover the cost of the temporary improvements, and then it gets a little bit more complicated when the permanent ones come in. The county will, because it's 2 county roads, shoulder much of the cost, but there is a city cost share for that. And so one of the conditions that's been proposed in the recommended conditions is for the city and the school to share in whatever those future costs look like. The cost share that the city has for that eventual improvement is largely, my understanding is that it's largely stormwater, which is the reason that the stormwater has been expanded on this property, so that that future intersection, the stormwater created from it, is accounted for when that happens. The other piece is right-of-way, so the city would be responsible for any acquisition of right-of-way. And so we've accounted for both of those things on this plat now, so that when that intersection is improved in the future, the city's share is minimized greatly.
So to build on that point then, so on page 6.3 of the city will require cost participation from the applicant and no more than 50%. So does that mean we're splitting the cost with them?
Correct, 50% or no more than 250,000, which would be the upper limit of what we would expect, the improvements, yep. So that's exactly what that condition was attempting to, should accomplish.
So there's going to, at the intersection, if I'm understanding this correctly, the light will be down further more towards the gun club, is that correct?
Yep, so here, let me see if I'll try and get that cursor up again here. So the cursor is hovering over the main entrance. There will be some type of intersection control there that is permanent and that is installed by the school district.
Okay.
It might be a roundabout, it might be a light. I don't know that we've gotten that far yet to understand exactly what the control is, but there will be something.
Okay.
There will be a temporary intersection control wooden pole traffic lights. This will be installed by the county. The temporary condition will have to be funded by the school district as part of their project. And then in the future, that's what that condition is attempting to address, which is when those permanent improvements come in and there's a formal cost share between the county and the city.
So there will be 2 lights?
Yeah, there will be
going up in that area.
correct, yep,
Okay.
yep, correct.
And then one more thing on that, on the access, since we're talking about it. So the one that's there towards the north off of 17, that's the bus entrance, but that's
Yes.
the one that could be a no left turn.
Accurate, yep.
But buses are, is that, I can ask the applicant too, but is that a bus turnaround then for them to get back out?
Yeah, so.
Looking at, it looks like, the big parking strips there and kind of a bump out to the right.
Yes, there's a turnaround internal to the site, so when buses can turn left or right into the site, but when they're picking students up and they've turned around inside the site, which they have the room to do, and when they come back to get back onto Lake Elmo Avenue, that's when that access or that turning movement to the left could be restricted.
Okay.
And this is just due to county concern over issues with traffic.
But county still hasn't decided what they want for sure yet on that one?
Yeah, I don't know if it's been we've dotted the i's and crossed the t on exactly what's gonna happen there, so. All right, so I'm gonna move us on here to the review comments. City internal review staff have had an opportunity to comment on the application. We've had the fire department, city engineer, and a landscape architect. We've also had the city attorney look at the plat, or we will actually, I think, when they apply for the final plat. And then we've also had Washington County provide a letter of, for their review, and then Valley Branch is going through there will be an application to them soon, so they're tracking it as well. We'll walk through the findings here, and then I'll provide the recommendation. So again, the variance to lot area, the practical difficulties here are just the number of different improvements, the location on the site. We have a buffer. We don't want to create a different parcel that's landlocked. I think there's a lot of findings that can support approval of a variance for the lot area maximum. In terms of the buffer, again, we have a county requirement for access spacing that's primarily safety driven, so that's not something that the applicant can really control in terms of where that drive is located for the bus access. And we do need 2 access points, so if it wasn't a bus access, it'd probably be a gated access of some kind for emergency services that would still be subject to those spacing rules. In terms of subdivision findings, this project does not appear to meet any findings for denial that are established in the ordinance. And lastly, with the conditional use permit, those findings are in the staff report. There are 12 of them to support the approval of the CUP. We did notice a public hearing for this evening through the mail and the newspaper. We did receive 1 written comment from an abutting property owner noting concern for the number, the amount of tree removal on this site, and particularly focused on that 10th Street North corridor, the trees right along there. And lastly, that the letter wasn't supportive of an exception request. So there are 14 recommended conditions in the staff report. I have suggested that we add 2. I've added them in underline to this slide. The first one, again, is to provide a separate pedestrian and bike connection along the Lake Elmo Avenue North corridor. So making sure that we accommodate those pedestrians and bikes coming from the north. And the other underlined added condition is that the city may require the school district to conduct testing of noise levels on site to ensure compliance with Chapter 87A of Minnesota state statutes, and to require appropriate mitigation if deemed necessary. Other than that, these conditions are a mix of things that are unique to this project and ones that are mostly standard. So there are other conditions that address the accessing, the queuing on county roads, which we want to avoid, the tree mitigation, and the required infrastructure improvements. So with that, long presentation, I will note that I have a recommendation here to conditionally approve the project or send a recommendation to the city council. The school district's project team is here. They would like to share a few things with you, and then are happy to answer your questions as well. So with that, I can stand for questions, or I can bring those visuals up the schools team shared.
I've got one going back to the trees. I don't remember a situation where we've discussed natural versus planted. Why is that used as a measure of acceptance?
That's a good question. So the exception part of the narrative is based on the fact that in the city's ordinance, people who have planted a tree on their property do not need to provide tree mitigation if they remove it. So if you planted it, you can take it down, and you're not subject to tree mitigation requirements. So the thinking is, well, when that previous property owner owned the parcel, they could have removed the trees that they installed. That was an agricultural property. I'm not sure exactly why those trees were planted in the first place. There wasn't really any narrative to that. But the species mix and how they're planted in rows really tightly does seem like it could have been kind of some type of agricultural focus. So the trees were either timber or tree farm type species. They're primarily pine or other Christmas tree type plantings.
But there's no history or record of any
Correct.
any commerce being conducted with these trees from
Correct.
that
The city
property.
doesn't have any records of that, no,
Right.
nothing.
Do we have any other questions at this time?
Yeah, in regards to the buffer from the gun club, the red line that kind of
Yep.
swoops through the property, is it the intent that nothing will ever be built as far as structure-wise to the west of that line that would cause Oakdale Gun Club to be non-compliant? I mean, there's been talk about how it's such a large piece of property and there might be other buildings and stuff, but I mean, is there any condition that would allow buildings to ever be built to the west of that red line? And you might not know the answer to that question.
In theory,
but
you could, like,
you
in
could,
theory,
okay.
you could, if there are other things that are constraints to the property, like, having multiple buildings, there could be stormwater issues, or access concerns, or, impervious surface concerns if you're adding a new building and more parking, might be butting up against those things. I don't know that the school has ever implied that they have plans on that part of the property. I also think that, the improvements were mostly located on the east side to avoid, if that noise study did come back with higher levels than were allowed by state, legally, the school district could have been required to not do anything there, and then may still have been allowed to have the school district, or the school building on the east half that's not in the buffer.
Okay.
Fortunately for the school district, the noise study came back with lower levels.
Thoughts of the noise study once the tree mitigation occurs?
So that's a fair question. I was concerned about that myself. It looks like a majority of the trees that are being removed primarily buffer the parking area, and so there are still a number of trees that are gonna buffer the school building and
Can
the
you go
ball
back
fields.
can you go back to the tree
Sure.
removal plan?
Yep.
Thank you.
So there will still be trees that are removed, of course. Part of the attenuation of the shooting range's sound is just due to the distance. So there are other factors obviously involved. Trees do obviously reduce sound.
And all the trees there along 17, is that removal because of the storm? I'm trying to see what those other lines are.
Yeah, that's another good question. So there are removals located along Lake Elmo Avenue for stormwater ponding and the grading associated with that, utilities and connections that are required to ensure that the water's looped correctly. And then we've also got the trail that's going in as required along both of those county road corridors. The trail does require some of the trees to be removed as well.
And how far will that extend with the roadways? Like, this is the school district property,
Yep.
but what about further north? What about, even south, even what happens to the adjacent properties with the
Very-
road?
Fair question. So the trails have been required for this project. This is consistent with how the city's processed other development projects, where we have our comprehensive plan that has a sort of a system of trails in it that we expect will ultimately be sort of the ultimate build out of the trail system. And with each development, the city's required that portion of the trail system be constructed.
But
So
what about
these-
the roads, not trails, but what about, do the roads need to be expanded?
At this time, I don't think there's any need for expansion other than at the location of the intersection.
Oh.
In the future, there could be some expansion. There will also be turn lanes installed on this site as well.
Further questions?
On the, your new recommendations for approval, I think it was point 10. So when you're saying we may require the school district to conduct testing of noise levels, is that once the school is up, that we might be asking them to do that? So at that point, we might ask them to do more, so down the road, we may ask
Yeah,
them?
really, this is intended to cover our bases as the city to make sure that we have the ability to require sound testing if there's some reason to suspect that the sound generated from the gun club is really high, a lot higher than what was found during the testing. I think the methodology that was submitted by the acoustic consultant was like solid. It made sense, how they measured it, the locations and all those things. So there's definitely, I don't think, a reason to suspect that that's wrong, but it's just to make sure that we as, the city have the opportunity in the future, should we need to.
Was there anything unique to this project in relation to fire suppression systems outside of other large projects we've had? Just in terms of the fire chief and city engineer in terms of water availability and usage?
Well, that's definitely a big reason why a connection to city water was important and why that has been worked on a separate track, because there's this project in the Oakland Middle School that will both ultimately be connected. Having the city water supply available for that at a good pressure will support the need for the sprinkler system that, of course, the sprinkler system is required for the building. So,
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
How are trees determined whether they're planted or natural? What was that?
The tree mitigation schedule showed a difference between planted by the former owner and were naturally occurring. So trees that were planted by the former owner were in orange. and
Right,
they-
I mean, how was
Yep.
that determination made?
So I think primarily by aerials and also by using the tree inventory. So I don't know that I can speak any further to that.
You know, there were no trees there at one point, so they were all planted or at some point during the phasing. So I'm just curious, because it's kind of scattered.
Yeah, I can't speak any
Yeah.
further than that.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Perfect. And we do have the applicant here, you said?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we can hear from the applicant, questions, and then go from there.
All right, so if you want to, these are the two visuals that Val shared.
Okay, look at this. Mark Dormerhausen, Director of Operations, Stillwater School District. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight in reviewing our new Lake Elmo Elementary. Just a quick little review of kind of where we've been. Last November, we passed a bond referendum for two new schools that are over 100 years old. The one here at Lake Elmo and then one at Bayport Elementary. This site, I know there's been a lot of conversations about this site, but just kind of take you back of kind of where we are and the site of why it was chosen. Our current Lake Elmo site is in Lake Elmo, but it's not in the Lake Elmo school boundary. So our student population, the demographics of where in our district students come from has changed over the years. I was a product here at Stillwater. When I was a kid, Highway 36 was kind of the dividing line. Half the kids lived above Highway 36, half the kids lived below 36. Now that dividing line is significantly farther south than it once was. Just think of where the growth is all coming in the Lake Elmo / Woodbury section of our district. So as where kids come from, the needs where schools live changes where they are. So Lake Elmo has served us for 100 years and we want to stay part of the Lake Elmo community. Unfortunately, as a school system, we need the school to be farther south than where it's currently located. So that was one of the reasons why we were attracted to a site that's further south than where we currently are. Also, some of the city ordinances or policies state that a school has to be off a main road, and we're not talking 36 or anything, but it has to be off kind of an arterial road. And the attraction of this site actually has two. So I know there's a lot of traffic on it, but it's also part of the reason why we chose there, because it has two arterial roads with Lake Elmo Avenue and 10th Street. So with that, that's kind of where we are here today in terms of a land use. A couple other things is we have Wold Architects here that has been part of our design here through the process that just wants to highlight a few of the design features here of this site, and then we'll open up to any questions that you may have for either one of us.
Hi, I'm Valerie Peterson with Wold Architects and Engineers, and as Mark said, I'm part of the design team. First, I just want to send a special thanks to Nate and your city staff engineers. We've actually been meeting with them every 2 weeks for a number of months, including with Washington County and the watershed, because as you've seen today, there's a lot of complicating issues and a lot of governing entities with different criteria that we're trying to negotiate and walk through. So that's been really, really helpful in our design and communication. So I just want to applaud the city for organizing that and helping out the design team. I think a lot of this Nate elegantly covered for us. So we have our two accesses. That's also enhancing some of our site safety and pedestrian safety on the site to separate those buses from the parents. And we also worked very hard to position the building actually where it is elevated high enough to allow a lot of those natural water basins that are present on the site and that we could not relocate, to leave those alone. So a lot of those infiltration basins that you're seeing, especially off to the east, are supporting future road work and basically the county's watershed plans for when they begin some expansions of their roadway systems. The building also is designed with those materials that is predominantly brick. And I guess I'm happy to support any questions that you may have as well from the design team.
Perfect, thank you. Do we have questions?
On the elevations of the school, is it design or is that where you're changing whatever, there's some design work on there? Is that just a random design or is that reflective of something? I guess what's the intent?
Intentional.
Yes.
So there is, it's actually different colors of brick that are gradiating up a little bit. So there's about 3 colors of brick that's actually intended to construe kind of a prairie elevation. So we have a little bit darker of a brick, and then it lightens up to the lighter brick, which is, kind of visualizing the
Okay.
sky. So it's kind of the space beyond that. So that's the part on the left side of the building. The dark brown areas, that's the metal panel that Nathan presented earlier. That's kind of representative of some of the tree bark that you would see in a prairie from some of the trees. And then off to the right, that gymnasium is actually a storm shelter for students. So it's a storm shelter that's large enough to support the entire student body and staff in the building during a 250-mile-per-hour wind event. It has facilities in there for bathrooms as well. So that part of the building is actually concrete because of the inherentness of it being a storm shelter. And there are some recesses in the concrete that are intended to create some shadow lines to represent some of the clouds. So that's the design aspect
I was
of it.
wondering if there was anything that was reflective of Lake Elmo specifically.
Yeah.
So
Well,
actually it is. So like to take, there's different themes for each of the buildings. So Bayport, where it's located, there's kind of a river or watershed theme with the connection to the river.
Yep.
Here, this kind of has a prairie theme with the connection to the Lake Elmo Park Reserve.
Cool.
So if you look at some of the interiors, some of the pictures of the building, it represents that prairie theme with
Neat.
the location of the site.
Thanks, Mark.
Additional questions?
Can I address one real quick? We
Sure.
talked about irrigation of this site. So typically our practice is we do not irrigate elementary schools. Our 2 middle schools and high school has irrigation, but currently we do not irrigate any of our elementary sites.
Is there a reason for that?
Just ball field usage. The most of our middle schools, Oakland, Stillwater Middle and High School, get a lot of rentals and usage out of them. Typically our elementary schools do not see that high volume, so we do not have irrigation on those sites.
Gotcha.
I thought you said you did. You do not have any irrigation on this one?
Say it again?
I thought there was irrigation. There is no irrigation on this one?
There is irrigation on this one to support a lot of the tree growth. I would say just around the parking lot and the building itself, but not the entire 47 acres.
I think it comes back down to the sound study, and maybe I missed it with Nathan. So within that boundary, within that 750-foot boundary, what can and can't be done?
So you can establish a use within the 750-foot buffer if you do not cause the gun club to become non-conforming. And so that's why we needed the noise study.
Yeah.
So if the noise study came back higher, like the noise impacts from the gun club were higher than 63 decibels, which was the standard established by the statute, then a use couldn't take place in that buffer because it would technically cause the gun club to be over
Okay.
its threshold.
Okay.
So it's kind of a weird way to look at it. Normally, we look at the sound that's created by a use and not that it's subject to.
Yep.
But in this case, we needed to look at that, so that's how they measured it. So I would also just tack onto that. We were particularly concerned with ball fields as well, knowing that the building was going to be out. We wanted to understand if we needed to control for any uses like ball fields that would occur within that buffer. And
That's
so-
where my head was at.
So the sound study is good, it's good news for the school district because that means they can effectively kind of program that area without, having issues with the statute.
Right.
Perfect. Last call, any questions? Perfect, thank you much, appreciate it.
I appreciate your following up and why we're here. That's cool. Thanks, Mark.
All right, at this point, we do have a public hearing, so for anybody in the audience who came late, if you do wish to speak, I've got two that have submitted. There's papers there in the far back. As a reminder for everybody on the commission and those in the audience, the public hearings, we make a motion to open it up. I'll call you up. You'll have up to 6 minutes to speak. I'll give you a little 1-minute countdown as we're getting closer. Know that it's your time to voice your opinions, but it is not a Q&A. So any questions you ask are rhetorical in nature, but they are heard. Again, at 6 minutes, I'll cut you off. We then have another motion to close the public hearing, at which point all public comments, got to keep them to yourself.
And state your name and address.
Yes, thank you.
Before we get to the public hearing, I'm just going to remind everyone that, yes, I am an employee of the Stillwater School Districts. It has been determined that I do not have a conflict of interest, so I will be voting on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. To the commissioners, we do need a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Bullock, seconded by Commissioner Raycamp to open. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and the public hearing is now open at 7:20 PM. The first name I've got here is Phil. And again, name and address, please.
Yes. My name is Phil Dreyer. I live at 11040 12th Street North. My property adjoins 10th Street. And I apologize if I can't quite read all your names when I'm speaking because I don't have I have my reading glasses on. As a side comment, Commissioner Michelle, you asked a very good question. They will widen the roads because they are required to have turn lanes at all the intersection points and at the intersection where the 10th Street and Lake Elmo Avenue because of the intersection mitigation. They will widen the roads. So, and looking at all the documents and the reports, I'm reminded of a child who doesn't quite do their homework and has an excuse that says, the dog ate my homework. I had to travel to Europe to stop World War III. I was at the beach. They didn't have Wi-Fi. It's not my fault. The minimum lot area, the city's maximum lot size is 20 acres. In the report, it says it wasn't created by the applicant. They knew they wanted to build on 47 acres on a 47-acre lot. It is their fault. The Shooting Range Protection Act, 61 decibels, 48 to 52 decibels where the school's located. We've lived on that property for 30 years, and as we've had people visit our property across the street, oftentimes we get people who have lived in the cities, their first comment is there an active shooting going on? Guess what? That's what we're gonna expose our children to. The noise level in the fall, they haven't submitted that report, but your own planner is saying it's okay as part of this variance and report they want to do. They're not doing their homework and they want a variance right now. The district has not delivered a report but wants the variance right now. The tree preservation. Because of the previous owner, a landowner's tree, a tree is a tree. Look at our home. You know where my address is. I've stated that publicly. We planted trees in a row because of the sound mitigation, because of our property lines. We're not a tree farm. You can come to my house anytime you wish. It's not feasible for them to mitigate the trees. Taxpayer dollars would go towards substantial tree mitigation. An exemption, they can spend more money on building amenities. That's from the Calix Design Group study. Their job isn't to put in social commentary. Their job is to evaluate the trees on the property and tell you what is and should not be done. Consistent with the goals of a comprehensive plan. The original plan was for 2040 for it to be a farm. I can also tell you, and Commissioner Thomas, you made a good statement. We've lived there for 30 years. They've done nothing but plant corn on that property. Why'd they plant trees? Sound mitigation, soil preservation, wind from the soil preservation. There's many reasons why they would plant trees. Even your planner said, if you plant it, you don't have to replant the trees. They didn't plant the trees. Why are we letting them off the hook to not replant trees? Staff recommendations, a fee of up to $50,000 rather than required $4 million. Fee in lieu of $50,000 as opposed to $4 million. It sounds like we're gonna let them off the hook for $4 million. They've got $175 million in their budget. I think they can have enough in their budget to fee in lieu of not planting trees. Building design will not alter the essential character of the locality in which the property is located. Now, keep this in mind, and this kind of goes into their CUP plan. They're gonna tear down all the trees along the boulevard, tear down all the trees on the adjacent property value, on the adjacent property. They're gonna build a school with 2,400 feet for buses. They're gonna build a ball field. It's 150,000 square feet, commercial-looking building that's gonna be lit all night long. And they're gonna have traffic signals and traffic congestion on the property, but that will not substantially diminish or impair property values. As I read through their comments in the CUP plan, imagine this as you have your considerations. Imagine if this was in your neighborhood, at your house, and think about this. With all of this construction going on and all the trees and a two-story commercial-looking building, it will not be detrimental or endanger the convenience of general welfare of the neighborhood. There's traffic. It conforms to the comprehensive plan. The original plan didn't have it there. It has it for rural development, not a school. The development is compatible with the existing neighborhood. You've seen the pictures, it's right up there. That's compatible with a rural neighborhood? I dare say it's not. Meets development standards in Article 15. Actually, the own report says it's going to be in compliance if you give them a variance, so actually it does not. It'll be compatible in appearance and character of the general vicinity and not change its character. With traffic, tearing down of trees, a two-story school, 2,400 feet of buses every single day, a ball field that's going to be used more often as they're having all these amenities, it will change. Detrimental to any persons or property because of excessive traffic, noise, or glare. If it's not detrimental, why are they putting in stoplights and turn lanes? Not create traffic congestion or interfere with traffic on surrounding public thoroughfares. Oh, I almost forgot. As far as the trees go, even a kindergartner knows from the Lorax. I am the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you seem to be chopping down as fast as you please. I speak for the trees because they can't speak for themselves. So with all of this, I recircle back to my original statement. They're like a kid who doesn't do all their homework and wants you to say, it's not my fault. Please give me a variance and let me off with $4 million because it's not my fault. They haven't done all their homework. In fact, your planner says they need further reports for the sound mitigation. Haven't done all their homework. Think about that. I urge you to vote no on this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Next, I have Mary Sue. And say, Mary, if you just don't mind, full name and address.
Of course, Mary Sue Schrantz, 11040 12th Street North. Imagine 32 years married to that guy, and I agree with him. Thank you for the opportunity to make public comments on the proposed changes to this parcel in question for the new Lake Elmo Elementary School. And to support the comment and the question about the loss of trees on both sides of the county roads, as far as we've been told, the county will require 75-foot right-of-way plus another 10 feet for utilities, non-buildable, on each side from the center of the current, especially Lake Elmo Avenue. So look at the trees on the east side of that road as well, because those will be impacted. And I understand that we're talking about the school parcel right now, but just as you look and support the whole of Lake Elmo, I ask you to remember that. So I've read through the 128-page packet. I've even squinted and tried to decipher the maps. And what stood out to me is that this very square peg is being pushed through the very round hole. But that's not unexpected, as the City Council in March did not support this commission's recommendation of not changing the comp plan and rezoning the parcel to begin with. So a 73% tree loss is acceptable. Sharpen your chainsaws, because any mitigation requirements will be off for any future developments in Lake Elmo. And a $48,000 in lieu of fee for $4 million, same thoughts. Why bother having anything at all going forward? And I also agree that it's not up to the design firm, Calyx, C-A-L-Y-X, if I'm pronouncing that right, to suggest how that difference in money could be spent by the district. That's between the district and their taxpayers. And again, my comments here are before some of the updates, so I'll say the county's memo in their bullet number 5 states storage on the property, meaning bus and car queuing, is not enough. If that's been mitigated, awesome. But I just want to prove my point that I read to page 128, because that was bullet number 5 on page 124. My point on this is that there are still open items to be addressed, and if they're not addressed now, when? If the variances are approved before all parties come to a closer consensus, why should we ever expect to have a say in any future requests for this project or others? Given these issues I can read, and others that I'm sure you're more aware of than me, it seems that this request is premature. But to paraphrase the packet, we are moving at an aggressive pace on this project. So my request and suggestion is at best a deferral, if not a no vote. And let's not forget, and maybe this has been taken care of, but the city requested a second sound study. That hasn't taken place now. I understand maybe, and it sounds like conversation, yes, it'll be okay, is going to be good enough. And if we add that the city may request, not that the city shall request, that's a difference in nuance between those two words. Anyway, how can a variance be approved before that study is complete? If the council and the commission has said that they don't need another study, so be it. While I recognize the council's desire to move forward with this project at an aggressive pace, I also believe that this commission has the opportunity to identify those issues that you believe you have influence over, focus on them, keeping the history and character of the city of Lake Elmo, both for its current residents and future residents and projects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Last call, oh, perfect.
I think we were next, right?
Yep, you guys were the last, Bob and Carrie? Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, Robert Mamigay, 10699 10th Street North.
Oh, you gotta tell them your name.
Oh, I'm Carrie Mamigay at the same address.
Perfect.
We're new at this, I guess. So, I guess our concern is where we live, we are having a hard time even getting in our driveway the way it is. And we don't have a turn lane, what they're talking about, an extra turn lane to get into our driveway. We've almost been hit twice. And we've heard of our neighbors, the same thing. We can't even come from, what do you say, Lake Elmo Avenue and turn left into our driveway without somebody basically rear-ending us. Or we'll be stopped to try to get into our driveway and they'll go around in the turn lane going into the cul-de-sac. Or the what do you call it? Cul-de-sac that goes into, what road would you call it?
10th Street.
10th Street corridor, and that would be right next to where, I guess, where the school's going. So we would like more explanations on what's going on, because where we live, we haven't received much information on the school thus far. Meaning turn lanes, roundabouts, and you guys are talking about the noise of the gun club. We can hear it where we're at, and we're across 10th Street we're on the south side, if you know where we're at. And talking about trees, we did plant none of those trees in our very front off of 10th Street. They were all naturally, they came about when we were living there. They planted themselves. We don't know how that happens, but they did. So I guess our concern is not just the noise from the gun club. We're okay. We moved there because we already knew it was there. We don't care about that. We're used to it. But it's traffic coming up. There's been so much more traffic than when we first moved there. And it's traffic constant on 10th Street. So if you're not gonna enlarge it, I don't know how you're gonna get buses in and out of there with, I guess, can you add to it?
Yeah, on 10th Street, if you guys know, it's all increased tremendously. When I heard a roundabout there in order for the cars to get in, since there's only one entrance for the parents and another entrance for the buses, everything's funneling out onto 10th Street. The rear ending, you know, you just think if you're coming from the west and you're coming down 10th Street and you gotta get in to the school, you gotta go all the way around that roundabout. If this school is passed, go in there. And then you're gonna go up and you're gonna put a stoplight up on the corner of 10th and 17. And, you know, not knowing if the road's gonna be enlarged, I agree with that gentleman right there, that there's just no way in how much of the private owner's land are you gonna take in order to make these things happen and force it down. But it's a big thing is the safety. And then, I don't know what was talked about, the buses leaving onto 17 and not being able to make a left out of the school. What, are they gonna have to drive 5 miles around Lake Elmo in order to start their route to drop kids off? Talk about the kids, where's busing gonna stop for the kids? Cimarron, are they all gonna have to walk to school from there? Because it's within 4 blocks, or whatever the cutoff is by the school district. What about the safety factor for those kids? Safety factors for the people driving on Lake Elmo Avenue. And for us, I'd like to know where that entrance is gonna be for the main entrance on 10th Street there. What it's gonna affect my neighbors and us with, you know, coming across. Is it down 300 feet, 1,500 feet? What is it, you know? So at least we can actually look at what you guys are proposing. Oh, 1 minute.
1
left.
minute left.
Yep, okay.
And there was already a bad accident, there's been bad accidents already on Lake Elmo Avenue and 10th Street.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how the school chose that lot because of the size or whatever, but with the Met Council, all we kept hearing is everything's gotta be the south side of 10th Street. You know, did we change our ordinance of how we're gonna pursue with everything? Because a lot of developments are north of 10th Street. And how does that work, you know? I mean, the sewer, the water, are you gonna be running it down 10th Street in order to have enough pressure and water for the school? You know, because it's only up on 17 right now. And then they're talking, you're going 75 feet from the center line and then another 10 feet for the utilities. You know, how far is that going into everybody's yard? But thanks for listening to us.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. All right, last call. Did we have anybody else? All right. Hearing none, we did, as city staff had mentioned, there was one public comment that was received via email before the meeting. That public comment, was that the one you had mentioned? Okay. Which was also talking about the tree mitigation and not in support of moving forward, which was from Benjamin Johnson. With no other individuals coming up for public comment, we'll go back to the commissioners here to entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Vreese, seconded by Commissioner Stile to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and the public hearing is now closed at 7:40 PM. Would you mind flipping back to, we'll need a motion before we can get to discussion. Perfect. Do we have anybody on the commission who would like to make a motion?
Move to recommend city council approval of the conditional use permit variances and preliminary plat requested for the Lake Elmo Elementary School proposed by Stillwater Area Public Schools, ISD 834, with the conditions and finding listed in the staff report.
We have a motion by Commissioner Vreese to recommend approval. Do we have a second? I'll go in second so we can do discussion. So motion by Commissioner Vreese, seconded by Commissioner Reisner. Commissioner Stile, or sorry, I was looking at you. Commissioner Vreese.
There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of work that's been done the last couple of months. I think the layout of the site, the two separate entrances, I think is a great thing. I am concerned about the trees. It's a unique situation where the tree density was what it was and how many of the trees that there were. I am encouraged that the school district plans to plant at least another 250 trees. And I understand civil work and, how some of those trees need to be removed in order to make the site work for retainage. I do think that I am encouraged by the fact that there will be some sort of traffic control on 10th and Lake Elmo. Traffic on 10th Street has been, I live off of 10th and Lake Elmo myself. It's been pretty bad, especially with I-94. It's like a shortcut to Wisconsin on 10th Street. So my hope is that when 94 opens back up, traffic goes back to more of a normal level. Yes, the school will bring more traffic, but I'm encouraged that the fact that there will be a roundabout or stoplights or a combination of both. But I really like the plan that was laid out, and there's now 16 conditions of approval. So it's not that this is just an open and shut thing. There's still a lot that needs to be done, and that's the whole purpose of the conditions of approval. So I am for granting these variances and preliminary plat requests.
Thank you, Commissioner Reese. Other discussion points?
Well, the trees are a big deal with me, and I understand you have to remove some trees in order to put the building in there. I get all that. And the fact that some of them have only been there 35 years. 35 years is a long time, and part of what I love about Lake Elmo is its beauty. And I just don't want to see things just being torn down just because, and then not having to replant. Yes, it's gonna be difficult to replant some trees, but I still think there's more room for more trees. But the other concern that I have is, and maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm just not keeping up with it, we've seen so much on the school property, but I don't get a real sense of what's going on around it. And that's my concern, because yes, you're taking down a lot of trees on school property, which I don't like, but I just worry about 10th Street and Lake Elmo Avenue and what's gonna happen there. What's gonna happen there to people's properties? What's gonna happen there to trees? What's gonna happen there as far as the temporary signals for kids having to cross? I guess I need a bigger picture of what's going on around that property. And that's where my concern lies right now.
For clarification, you mean outside of their property line?
Correct, sorry, yes. Further down 10th, further up Lake Elmo Avenue, further down Lake Elmo Avenue. I'm not getting the whole picture, and that concerns me.
The impacts required due to the road expansion as a result of the school on private property owners.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Do we have additional?
Yeah. I think my concerns are with the trees. I think that planted versus natural creates a dangerous precedent within city ordinance, and we undermine it and weakened the intent behind that by saying they were planted by the previous owner, so we can cut them all down, so they're not going to apply. But I don't think that $4 million fee, which is going to come back to us all as taxpayers within the school district anyway, makes a lot of sense either. I think there's a better compromise, and I don't have it in front of me because I don't have the math or the ability to say, all right, it's not 4 million, but it's going to be more than 50. I think we need to look at a better number in a combination of trees and fees that bridges that gap a whole lot better. There's a whole lot of space there, and I think looking at the landscaping plan specifically along 10th and Lake Elmo Avenue, that there's room for more screening. You're going from this really deep 3 or 4 deep tree line along those roads, and we're going to rip them out and put a new tree every 50 feet. I understand they need to be ripped out in order to get the civil work done, but I think there's opportunity to come back to this and say, it's not a $4 million fee, but it's also not planting 260 trees. I think there's opportunity there. I think that's where we need to get back and look at a better deal. And I'm concerned at what noise is going to do once it is fall and once that the trees do go away, what that's going to look like. And if that is over 63 decibels, Nathan, what happens?
So
If the sound study comes back in the fall and it's louder than the minimum levels?
Chair and Commissioners, so we did push the school's consultant on getting information about the fall. They submitted a follow-up report that we just didn't have time to amend the packet for this meeting, because this has been obviously a process, right?
Absolutely.
So we did get more information as to the methodology that the consultant used, and that will be for sure included in the city council report, because we'll have time obviously to add it. They also did provide findings after having said, like, this is the methodology we're using. The findings that they provided also demonstrated that in the fall, with the change in attendance at the gun club, some of the other conditions that we've talked about, the property is still under the decibel level. So that's why I mentioned that they're still meeting.
That's based on modeling or?
It's based on modeling, and so
Okay.
in part, the reason that I felt it was really important to recommend to you that condition is if there is some circumstance where it seems that the sound is too great, too high of a level, the city has the ability to require testing on the site.
Okay, and what if the sound comes back, if the testing comes back that it's over the decibel limit?
So then
What's the
Sure.
resolution?
So the resolution might be a couple things. It might be discontinuing part of the use that's within that buffer. So in this case, it could be a ball field that's located there. Maybe that cannot be used anymore. There could also be some middle ground. In some cases, there could be signage put up that, at certain hours of the day, it's warning people. Of course, there could be programming changes at the school district, obviously, to not allow people in a buffer area where it's not allowed. There could be a number of different things. Mitigation in terms of more trees would be another option.
Point of clarification in the cash in lieu of fee, is that code or is that recommendation that it should not exceed 50,000?
So the tree mitigation ordinance has that exception language. Part of the exception provision allows the city to require a cash in lieu fee. So there's not a fee in the ordinance, but we do have grading agreements that we use for developments where we've kind of quantified the value that it costs the city to plant a tree. So that $325 per caliper inch is kind of representative of what the cost is to plant a tree.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, you see the two different numbers, and I get, given it's a school and where it's got to go and all the other extenuating factors. As a recommending body to the city council, I think that's where there's 4 million seems excessive. 50,000 for the amount of removal there seems comparably pocket change. So
Agreed.
I know they're listening because they watch these meetings. I think that's one of the recommendations I see is like, okay, they're gonna have to remove trees. Every project we seem to have has some sort of tree removal. There's gotta be a better way to make sure, and again, can help with sound study. I know most of these are on the southeast side of the property there. I agree. I think it was Phil, don't mean to put words in your mouth if this wasn't you who said it, but a tree is a tree. So I think regardless of how it showed up on the property, it is on the property. They are new property owners. That tree is there. A tree is a tree, which should be another consideration for the city council to take into consideration. I do fully understand the need for the new school. I mean, given the age, the location, as the applicant had mentioned, where the majority of our students live, being able to go to the school that is near their home, so we don't have long bus rides. Also, somebody who lives off of 10th Street and trying to get two kids to school and have to sit there waiting 10 minutes to turn left is a nightmare. Again, hopefully 94 helps clear that up, but I think people found our secret road and they like to use it. It's a challenge. I hear Commissioner Bullock, you're saying, the surrounding areas, trying to keep focus on the variant and the requests at hand. It's tough for us, again, as a recommended body to take into consideration future. It's definitely something that the city council, I think, absolutely needs to hear what you stated, because there are impacts to other areas. But again, kind of out of the realm of what is as a discussion point here this evening. I'll hold for now. Commissioner Sile?
I think this is a good plan. I do like, there's a lot of thought into the traffic, and that is a concern. On that issue, is there any feeling from the city if a roundabout is better or a light? Because if I'm reading through the lines, I think the city might not prefer a roundabout, but is that a fair assessment or not? You can tell me if I'm wrong.
So Chair and Commissioners, so I guess my clarification question for you would be which location? Are you talking about 10th and Lake Elmo? That location?
Either one, I guess, yeah.
So I think as we get through the final design, so it's not uncommon to conditionally approve a project. As you know, we're still working through those final parts of the design, some of the final details, grading and things of that nature. So we're also working with the county staff to understand what the preferred alternative is at those locations. I don't know that I can tell you.
Okay.
Maybe the city engineer would have more information on exactly what the preference would be, but there will be a lot of input from Washington County, as these are county roads, and so we'll have to, of course, look to them as well for what their traffic modeling shows as the better alternative. Some of it could ultimately come down to long-term costs or the amount of right-of-way that's available, things like that.
Can you, this was the other one I remember, Bob and Carrie had brought this up regarding, because we've talked before on county roads, is more on, I think, on the inwood side of just how many entrances are onto county roads. So when we're talking, I can't get the picture to load.
Oh, sure.
When we're talking about the main entrance, not the bus entrance there, that's off of 10th. Yeah, I was just trying to see how close that is to what I think is their entry point into the house there, further to the west.
Sure. See if I can get a bigger site plan up. That might help a little bit.
I mean, again, if the discussion point is a traffic light or a roundabout there, I mean, is that location pretty well set based off the storm ponding?
Yeah, I would say the access locations are very firm. This is because we've had to work in collaboration with the county on what's the appropriate locations for these access points. The city approving the development without having worked with the county would be tough, because ultimately the school district needs the access permit from the county. And so part of the point of trying to do all that coordination on the front end was getting answers to these questions. One of those things is the two different access points, and then the spacing for those access points. There's definitely concern to make sure that there's a minimum spacing from the 10th Street North and Lake Elmo Avenue intersection. We don't want traffic controls to be too close together.
Yeah, I guess my concern comes down to that entry point there that's on the south side of 10th to the west of that. Because if it's, I don't know if they've decided if it's a protected left turn lane or not. That means residents leaving from there probably never get to turn left. Does that make, is that an access road that I'm seeing there? It's,
So I don't know if I can say, for certain whose driveway this is, just without more context, as we know. But I do know that right and left turn lanes are required at this access point to get into the site and out of it.
okay, I think that's definitely something for city council too, to make sure we're taking a close look at this one. Just as, again, knowing the amount of traffic on that, it's gonna be,
Impacts to access to neighboring properties.
there'll be an impact, and that's, I'm just looking at like how close that is to a potential, again, especially if it is a light that gets put in there, but. Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff. The maximum lot area for, at 20 acres, can someone provide some background to that at 20 acres? Why do we feel like that was set at 20?
I'll start and Sophia can jump in if she wants to correct me. So we had talked about this at one of our housekeeping revisions, and there was some questions about why do we have the maximum. This is limited to the public facilities zoning district. So it's not just for, schools are often only in that district, so take that for what it is. But we're looking at non-tax-paying uses. And so the idea is generally to keep those uses on smaller parcels.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought.
I guess related to that, you mentioned at the beginning, but the actual used space here, what's the acreage out of the 47?
So there's 47.6 acres that this parcel is, that's the size. We have right-of-way needs, and so there is dedication of land through this plat to the city. I don't know ultimately what the final acreage number is gonna look like, in part because we have that southeast corner of this parcel that's gonna get kind of clipped to ensure that we get the right-of-way that's needed for any future improvements.
But with that, just, it hasn't come up, but there's no issues with impervious surface?
This site is at 18%, which is well below the 32 max.
Sorry, I cut in. Did you get
No,
your
you're
question
good.
answered?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or commentary?
It's when we vote tonight, it's an all or none. It's not, can we wait for more information type of thing, correct?
On the current motion as it stands, on the table is an all or nothing.
Okay.
That can be amended, keep me honest here, is to break that out or to provide amendments to it. Do we have?
I think the challenge is understanding what part, the tree portion, where does that fall into the 4 items of tonight, right? We've got the subdivision, the 2 variances and the CUP. Where do the trees fall in? Where does the tree issue and the tree mitigation fall into that?
So we'll review tree mitigation when we have development of a new property. Typically, that's associated with a plat, so as part of the subdivision, or you could consider it also as part of a CUP. So we would look to have those conditions on either approval.
Okay. But if we deny, then it's reasons, we need to provide the reasons why, right?
Correct. Do you need additional time to format
No,
thoughts or comments around it? Okay. Okay. Yeah, again, I think what's been stated, there's definitely a lot of concern here, and so I think it's one of the things, again, as a recommending body, that the city council hears and holds true, especially with those that took time out of their night to come here and speak and share as well. Hearing that, of course, variances happen, that's exactly why we're here. But the city council should take a very, very close look at the ones that have been highlighted tonight, specifically around tree mitigation, noise, as well as that traffic and access points. With that, there is still a motion on the table. Sorry, do you mind pulling that back up?
Absolutely, yep.
Just so I can reread it. All right, so again, the motion that was presented is to move to recommend city council approval. City council approve the request from ISD 834 Stillwater Area Public Schools for preliminary plat variances and conditional use permit for the Lake Elmo School with the with the findings and conditions proposed by staff. This time, we'll go ahead and take a vote on this. All those in favor of recommending approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2 with Commissioner Raycamp and Commissioner Bullig in the dissent. At this point, this will go to city council. Do we have a date set for this one?
November 6th, that's a Wednesday after the general election.
November 6th on a Wednesday. Will this also be open for public comment at that time, just for those here?
It's not a posted public hearing. That being said, sometimes the council will choose to hear folks that attend.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. At this time, that concludes item 4. For anybody in the audience, you are more than welcome to stay, but if you would like to leave, you are also welcome to leave as well. We'll give just a moment for those to clear who are leaving. All right, and with the room clearing there, we'll go ahead and continue on with our agenda. There is nothing under item 5, new and unfinished business. We'll move to item 6, communication updates. So,
Yes, 1 and 2 related to the old village. That was discussed at the September 9th Planning Commission meeting. Those items both passed. And then the new items are the open space PUD zoning text amendment. That went to City Council October 1st and October 15th, and that was approved with amendments last night. And then the Oakland Middle School CUP variance and minor subdivision was also approved.
I think it's important to note the amendment to the open PUD, which is a result, and on the point, if you haven't watched a city council meeting, that I think it was proposed to go from 0.45 to the density.
To 0.8, and then to 0.8, and then it was amended to only be at 0.8 if it had access onto a collector road.
Yep.
And then last night, it was amended down to 0.6 if it has access to a collector road. If it does not have access, it's still at 0.45.
But it wasn't as large a density jump as we had been, as we had seen.
it's been proposed. So.
Yeah. Good compromise.
And then upcoming meetings, October 28th will be canceled, and November 13th is on a Wednesday.
If the Republic still stands.
And with that, we have reached the end of our agenda for this evening. Again, they have all left, but appreciate our fellow Lake Elmo residents coming out this evening. City staff always for putting everything together, getting us prepared. And commissioners, thank you for your time and your insights. With that, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, close the meeting at 8:03 p.m.